Welcome everybody. Welcome to the first edition of the DFI, DraftKings breakdown. I'm here with Ryan and myself, Dave, and we're going to break down this UFC Fight Island 3. All right. First fight of the night, we got Nathaniel Wood versus John Castaneda. I'm going to probably butcher a lot of names on this card. Nathan Wood is, 9,500 on DraftKings. He's about a minus 400 favorite. And then John's 6,700 on DraftKings, and he's about a 340 underdog. What do you think of this fight, Ryan, for a DraftKings perspective?
DraftKings perspective, I do like Wood. I think he is a semi-safe play this week. But Castaneda does have some sneaky GPP play. I wouldn't put him in a single entry cash, anything like that. But if you're putting multiple entries in, I don't think he's the worst play in the world. I think that Wood will have a good chance of finishing him. Even if he doesn't finish him, I think that he'll be able to get enough strikes. The question is, is he going to get enough to justify that $9,500 price point that makes him the second highest fighter of this slate? I don't think there's many fighters on this card that are guaranteed 100 points. So, I like him, but I think that I do like some other people a little bit lower than him. A little bit better. What about you?
I pretty much agree with you for the most part. Wood's kind of, generally will be a safe play. You can use him for cash. I feel pretty confident you can use him in cash if you really want to. He's he has high upside with, in GPPs because he does strike at 4 strikes per minute. He averages, almost 2 takedowns, per 15 minutes. So he's got some, high upside and with plus a good finish, ability. He's got a minus 115 inside the distance line. So, he is a solid, GPP play as well. John, on the other hand, he's kind of like basically going to be a big boomer bust. He could go in there. I've seen him on the regional scene. He's knocked guys out, knocked guys down, plenty of fights. And, Wood just got knocked out on his last fight against Dustin. So he's not someone I'm going to say, if I'm playing single entry, I'm not going to use him. But if you're playing, 10 lineups, more than that, you might want to sprinkle him in for, a lineup or two.
Yeah, when I do lineups, I normally make about 20 lineups myself. So I'll probably have him sprinkled into a couple. But I'd say if you're doing less than 10 lineups, he's probably not someone that you necessarily want on it.
Yeah. Next fight, we got Ramazan Emeev at 98, or what at 98? I think he's 9,300, correct?
94.
94. Got that one way off. And then he's 9,400 on DraftKings. You got Nick Stolze at 6,400. I believe that's wrong as well.
Yeah, he's 6,800.
So yeah, just got him tripped up a little bit. If I could type. But for this fight, Emeev is just too high for his price at 9,400. He needs to get roughly 100 points, minimum 95 to get that 10x that you're looking for. But he strikes at just a little over 2 significant strikes a minute. He averages 1.5 takedown a minute. He doesn't really advance a ton. He's just a grinder against the cage. He likes to hold you against the cage. Try to work a takedown here or there. He does take control of the cage, so but he's not throwing strikes. But he just likes to take the center of the octagon. And Stolze, on the other hand, he's not that great. He's athletic. He throws a lot of kicks. He does mix in some takedowns, every once in a while. But for this fight, Emeev's just going to be too much. He's going to grind out a victory. Emeev, for his price, is honestly a fade. You could technically use him for cash if you really wanted to, but I don't even think you would want to use him for cash. But for the most part, this fight as a whole, you could probably fade.
Yeah, I'm kind of the same way. If you're doing multiple entries, I'd probably sprinkle them even to a couple. But for the most part, I think that this is going to be a pretty low-scoring fight. I'm not touching Stolze at all. I won't have him in one lineup. Emeev, like you said, he just doesn't really do enough. He only throws and lands 2.38 strikes per minute. He doesn't eat many strikes, but at the same time, when you're not throwing that many, you're not going to get much. He should get a couple takedowns, I think, maybe, but unless he gets the finish for that price, he's not going to throw enough strikes to justify that price. And I personally, I don't see him getting the finish, so I won't have much of Emeev at all.
All right, so let's move on to the next fight. We got Correia at 7,800. But somehow these pricing on here got all screwed up, so I'm going to be on this other screen for a second.
Yeah, 7,800's right.
I just got that, but Penny's not right. She is 8,400.
84, yeah.
So, what do you think of this fight?
I know we differ on this fight a little bit. I personally, I think it'll be a close fight. I do lean Beth, though. I think that she will be pretty good for cash, that she will get enough strikes to be able to, justify that price point and be able to get some other people in the lineup. So I do think that she's a good cheap play on DraftKings for cash. Panay, I'm not really touching. Not that I think that she'll do bad, but I don't think it'll be a very high scoring fight. I wouldn't be surprised if the winner only gets 70 or 80 points. So for Panay's price point, 8,400, there's other people that I like more than her on that price point or around that price point that I don't see myself going to her very much at all.
Yeah, I mean, both of them are pretty much cash plays to me. I mean, they both have a high, relatively high floor. And they both throw over 4 strikes a minute. So they're going to rack up, probably, closer to 100 strikes for a round plus the win. So they're probably going to get closer to 80 points minimum. I just think on the feet, Panny is just going to be too technical for Becce. Becce just throws wild hooks. She's not very technical. She's just kind of a brawler, wants to be in your face. And Panty's more of a, technical striker, got to, stick and move. I just think Panty's just going to be a little too much. It's going to be a close competitive fight, don't get me wrong. Depending on which way the judges see it, it's probably going to be a 29-28 split decision victory. But I just think Panty is going to squeak it out. Becce, because if she's 7,800, probably slightly better cash play just because you are getting that salary relief and the odds aren't that bad. I think right now Becce's a minus 150. I think last time I checked, and Penny's like
she jumped pretty high then, because when I looked earlier this week, she was the underdog. Actually, she was she was plus 110.
That's what I'm sorry. I meant to say plus 150, 160. She's in that range now. And
okay, then she went down a lot, honestly.
Yeah, then
she was almost even money before.
Panny was roughly, I think, minus 150. I think she's as high as 170 on some place. She's moving up. But yeah, so I mean, definitely, Becce probably a semi-safer cash play, just because you're getting some salary relief. But me personally, I think Panny is going to get the win, so she can obviously be a viable cash play as well. All right, moving on to the next fight. We got Tanner Boser versus Rafael Pessoa. This is kind of a, Pessoa is not a very good, fighter in general. He's kind of just throws wild, crazy strikes, looking to knock you out. It's not combinations. He either throws like, a jab followed by, a right hook to try to knock you out, or he throws some spinning kicks. He's not very good. He's surprisingly athletic for his size. He's a big heavyweight, and he's decently quick. But after one round, you can definitely tell he starts to slow down. He doesn't gas completely, but he definitely slows down after the first round. And then Boser, on the other hand, he throws over 4 strikes a minute. He's going to be way quicker. He just had a nice, impressive win in his last fight. I honestly think he's going to be higher owned than he should probably for this slate, based off the recency bias, getting that knockout. But for the most part, Boser, he mostly goes to decision. He got a lot of KOs on his record. He's nine KOs, 7 decisions, 2 subs. but most of those KOs are really on the regional scene, or they're TKOs where ground and pounding them. So I honestly think this fight's going to go to decision. Pessoa has never been knocked out either, so that's part of my reasoning as well. Boser, at his price, all the prices are wrong on my spreadsheet.
He's 8,900.
He's 89. Yeah, 8,900. He's, I think, for the price, he's a good cash play. He has GPP upside as I believe, he's plus 200 roughly inside the distance. I would prefer him more as a cash play. I think he's relatively safe, even though it is heavyweight. But, he does have GPP upside, so I wouldn't mind him for GPPs.
Yeah, I like Boser a lot in this fight. Correia has some of the worst defense that I personally have ever seen in my life. How he has not got knocked out in some of his fights completely baffles me, because the way that this guy throws strikes, he leaves himself so open, it's not even funny. I do think that Boser can very likely get the finish. Like you said, I do think that he more than likely will be a little bit more higher owned, where he did just recently come off that knockout victory. And, if you look at the fighters around his price point, he's probably the most well-known name right now around his price point for the casual MMA fans who have just started watching. So I do think that he more than likely will be kind of more high-owned. But yeah, I think that he's a pretty safe cash play. Should get you at least 80 points, I'd say. And I wouldn't be at all shocked if he does get the knockout and score around the 100 range.
All right. So that next fight of the night, we got Movsar Evloev versus Mike Grundy. What do you think about this one?
I think that I do think that it'll be a very close fight. I think it'll be a lot closer than what the odds and the salaries show. This is one of those fights where I don't think I'll really have any bets on it. It's going to be something that I just sit back and kind of enjoy. I do lean Evloev, but Grundy does have very good takedown defense. Just in his last fight, he didn't get taken down once. And that is Evloev's main thing that he goes for is the takedowns. He does average 4.50 takedowns per fight. So it's all going to depend on if he can get Grundy down. If he can get Grundy down, I think that he easily wins this fight. But I question on if he will be able to get Grundy down, and if he can't, I think that Grundy could outstrike him and get a decision-based victory. So I probably would go multi-lineup on either of these guys. I don't feel very comfortable going cash or single entry with either of these guys, just because I think it's a lot closer of a fight than what the odds and the salaries are showing.
I think honestly for this fight, it's going to be a relatively close fight. I mean, I think the wrestling's going to kind of negate each other on this one for the most part. They both very solid wrestlers, both have good takedown defense. But on the feet, it's going to come down to, if Evloev can avoid, Grundy's power shot for the most part, because if not, Evloev has, throws at a very high volume. He's a better technical striker than Grundy. And it's basically, and that's what it's going to come down to. And I don't know if Grundy is going to get the knockout. I mean, he only has one knockout on his record, but he does does have a lot of power. But I just think Evloev is going to be too much. Even if even if the wrestling happens, I still think, Evloev has the advantage. I think he's a better MMA wrestler, where I think Grundy might be a better collegiate or Greco-Roman wrestler, freestyle wrestler. But as far as DraftKings wise, I think Evloev he's 9,300, I believe, or
Uh,
9,100, 9,100.
91, yeah, and Grundy
Yeah,
91.
I think it's going to be it's going to be tough for him to pay off that salary unless he can honestly out grapple Evloev. I mean, he does throw 4 strikes a minute, which, it's not going to get him there. It's going to get him to like roughly 80 points in a win. But if he does, get us to his average of 4.5, whether it's 4 or 5 takedowns, for the fight, then he'll pay off value in a decision victory. I don't see either. I mean, Grundy, if anything, is more likely. I think is going to get a finish versus Evloev. But honestly, Grundy is not a bad GPP play. If at I believe 7,100.
Yeah.
I don't mind him as a little dart of a GPP play, but Evloev you can kind of almost play him in both cash and GPP. I'd probably say more of single entry GPP, but I don't really love either guy for the most part. I don't know. I don't think I'll play a ton of either of them.
Yes.
If anything, I'll be probably slightly more on Evloev just because I think there's more upside for the most part. All right. Next, we got Jay Collier versus Tom Aspinall. Ryan, I'll let you take this one first just because you did the write-up for it. So I want to hear your explanation on Aspinall.
Yeah, so this is the must-have pick of the slate, Tom Aspinall. Collier, he came in very overweight. He, we expected him to be around 245. He pushed over 260. So I don't think that he is going to have the cardio to be able to last very long in this fight. I already was heavily leaning Espinal, and then seeing that just pushed me to him being one of the top plays. Collier does not really have that great of a chin. He's shown many times that his chin can be rocked. So I would not at all be shocked if he gets finished late first, early second. He absorbs over 4 strikes per minute. So for a guy that's coming in overweight, I can only imagine, not having best cardio due to that. I don't see how he lasts this fight and how he doesn't get finished, honestly.
Honestly, when I was at work this morning and I was checking out the weigh-ins, and I didn't watch it live. I just kind of looked on MMA Junkie where they post it as they come along. And when I saw the 264 next to Collier's name, I thought it was a typo. I thought it was supposed to be for Pessoa, because honestly, that's who I thought would weigh in that much. I'd honestly never thought Collier would come close to that number. Collier fought at light heavyweight and even fought at middleweight before that. So, I mean, he was going to be, for this fight, he was going to be relatively small no matter what. And then he comes in weighing 264 and looked terrible. Not so much, he wore a T-shirt just to try to hide up how bad he was. He didn't even take off his T-shirt in for weigh-in. I mean, even before the weigh-ins, I honestly thought, Tom Aspinall was a great play for, GPP especially, but even cash. I thought he was going to be a relatively safe play. He's got power in his hands. I believe he's a brown belt in jiu-jitsu. I heard on another podcast someone said he was a black belt, but I believe he's a brown belt. He's all of his win has come in the first round, so it's a little, a little worrisome that every time he's gone out of the first round, he's lost. But I think most of that, in one of the fights he lost, it was because he was playing around on his back too much. He was trying to, work his BJJ on his back and, try to get some subs. He wasn't really trying to force the issue of getting back up, which hopefully at this point he's learned his mistakes. And, and in this fight, I just honestly think he's just going to be too fast, too strong. And honestly, he's going to knock him out probably end of the first round. And I mean, latest it would be the second round. But overall, he's just a great play. Even before we decided on the must-have, he was going to be my personal must-have. Going to be overweight on him by a lot. I'm assuming now with the weigh-ins, and Collier being so huge, his ownership's going to be up there. But him at his price range at 8,800, it just allows you to spend elsewhere.
Yeah.
Especially on this card, you have guys like Wood. You have like Chimaev, who are, those are the guys in the high range you want to target for the most part. All the other guys in the, that I would say relatively safe, but have huge upside. All the other guys have, some issues in the 9K range or high eights, whether, you can't trust them, they don't score well. So, having Aspinall just gives you that ability to spend in other spots and to fit one of those other guys in. And where if we had must have Wood or, Chimaev, it limits you on who you can play or makes your lineup construction harder to play.
Absolutely.
All right. Next fight, we got Nicholas Dalby versus Jesse Ronson. For DraftKings perspective, I think they're both kind of almost, cash play. I mean, Ronson's a tough dude. He's kind of not bad anywhere. Like, he's not great anywhere. He's not terrible anywhere. But he's relatively, goes to decision in most of his fights. He's in his 10 losses, he's gone to decision 7 times. So 70% of the time, he's going to decision. And then you have Dalby, on the other hand, who almost goes to decision in half of his fights. I just think for DraftKings wise, Dalby does have some upside. He could get a finish. He's got, he's plus 205 inside the distance. But I just think he's a little too highly priced. More of a cash play. I think he averages in his wins 75 points. So it's not super high. But Jesse, on the other hand, Ron said you could probably use him as cash if you need some, if you're looking for another cash guy down low to play. I don't mind him, but I'm not, I'm not targeting him either. But my preferred play might be Dalby just for cash mainly.
So you and I differ a lot on this one. DraftKings wise, I don't necessarily think that Dalby is the best play in the world, but I would not touch Rosen with a 10-foot pole. I'm honestly, like I said on my podcast, I don't even know how this guy is in the UFC anymore. He, this is his second run in the UFC. His first run, he wasn't successful at all. Granted, against some very good fighters, but he wasn't successful. They let go of him. Then he goes to PFL. He's not successful in PFL. Somehow he must have some dirt on Dana White or something like that, because somehow he's back in the UFC. This guy is going to be successful. He has shown time and time again that he can't get the job done. That he, like you said, he doesn't get finished very often, but he also has shown that he has a hard time winning rounds, that he just doesn't do enough to be able to win the rounds. I think Dalby does win this fight pretty easily. I do think more than likely that it will be via decision. So I don't know if I would say that Dalby is really a safe play for certain on DraftKings, just due to his price of $9,200. But I do think that he is a clear-cut pick in this fight.
All right, next fight up, we got Francisco Trinaldo versus Jay Herbert. What do you think on this one?
Another one that we differ a little bit here. So Herbert, I don't mind for GPP. I think that he has shown the ability to be able to win fights, that he has good knockout power, that he can finish fights. So he does have the ability to score big and break the slate for a 7,800 price. The issue is, though, Trinaldo has never been finished via knockout, which is Herbert's main go-to when it comes to finishing fights. I think Francisco is a very good cash play due to the fact that I think that he will throw enough strikes in order to win via decision. and get you in that 70 to 80 point range, which for cash is fairly safe. So I do like him a lot in cash. Herbert multi-entry. I don't mind throwing a couple darts at him just due to that knockout power, but he's a dart throw kind of, in my opinion. I don't think that he's a guarantee to be able to do anything. He could get 100 points. He could get 20 points. So I wouldn't go too heavy on him at all.
Yeah, me and you definitely see opposite on this fight. I mean, I'm not 100%, sold on Jay Herbert, but I think, Trinaldo's 41 years old, 42 years old. He's, he hasn't really gotten many finishes lately. He's basically been going to decision in most of his fights. And even the ones that he does got, it's not like he's knocking guys out. It's mostly TKOs or weird doctor stoppages. I just think Herbert's going to have a size advantage. He's going to be quicker. He's got more power. I just think, it's going to be more than likely going to be a stand-up war for 3 rounds. I honestly think this fight, like I think I said on your podcast, has potential to be the fight of the night. I just think it could be very entertaining. It might not be super, super high pace, but I honestly think it could be a fight where it's just going to be action-packed, where both these guys are going to land some big shots. I know Trinaldo has never been knocked out, but people said that about Frankie Edgar, and look what happened to him. He got knocked out against Ortega, and then he's been knocked out again since. So eventually, Father Time does sometimes let your chin crack, especially if you've been hit enough and you're that old. I could see Herbert knocking him out. It wouldn't surprise me, even though Trinaldo's never been knocked out. But even if it goes to decision, I think Herbert's, quickness, his speed, his power is just going to be too much. And I think he's a good GPP play. I wouldn't play him in cash necessarily, because if Trinaldo wins this fight, I think he's going to have to take him down. And I don't know if Trinaldo will. I mean, he only averages 1 takedown per fight. And he's not overwhelming when he's on the ground. He can control guys. He's not bad submission game, but most guys can honestly get back up after being taken down. They might, be down for a minute or two. I think Herbert's going to be able to get back up and then just keep piecing them apart. He's going to just be too long, too much. Trinaldo, like you said, is a cash play. If he does win, he's going to probably score his 75 points, which is fine for cash at his price. But I just think on my preferred play, I just feel like Herbert is the play on DraftKings, and higher upside and everything. Next fight, Kianzad Chimaev versus Rice McKee. I don't think we really need to spend much time on this fight. Chimaev should destroy McKee. It's probably going to end early in the first round. Chimaev is just going to take him down and ground and pound him, or get a sub. One or the two, depends on which way McKee wants to die in this fight. McKee was fought at 155 pounds most of his career, and now he's moving up to welterweight. And Chimaev just fought at middleweight and is moving back down to welterweight, which he's fought most of his fights at. So Chimaev is going to have a huge size advantage. And his wrestling, he is basically like everybody says, is Khabib 2.0. He's relentless. He's got great top pressure, and he doesn't throw a lot of hard strikes, but he just throws a ton of volume strikes when he's got you on the mat. I just think he's a lock for any, cash, GPP, whatever you want to play. The biggest issue is his price tag. He's $9,800. If you put him in your lineup, it's going to be tough building. I mean, you could still fit Aspinall in there, but you're going to be forced to basically put 3 underdogs in your lineup, plus having someone in the low mid-range of the favorites. I don't know if that's the right way to go. There is some guys in that range that you could play, like a Paul Craig or Antigulov. There's people like that you could throw in there, but it's tough, But he probably is going to score 100+ points. He's probably guaranteed that almost. And not many fighters on this card are, guaranteed that 100 points. I don't know. It's tough to build with him. He's probably going to be the highest owned fighter on the slate, but at the same time, too, his price could limit it. So maybe he won't be. But I just think after his last performance, taking a fight on 10 days, he's going to be very highly owned. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I do agree with you that, it's not a matter of if he wins this fight, it's a matter of when and how he decides he wants to win the fight. However he decides, he's either going to finish it via knockout, via submission. If he wants to show that he can control this guy for 3 straight rounds and just ground and pound him, he'll do that. I think he can do whatever he wants in this fight. The issue, like you said, though, is his price point. At 9,800, DraftKings has almost priced him out. I think, honestly, thinking back, I don't know if there's ever been a fighter that has been 9,800.
The only fighter that's ever been higher than him was Cyborg. When that was her first fight in the UFC, they had her on there. She was 10,000.
Okay, so he's the second highest, priced fighter in DraftKings history. In how long they've been doing MMA, that's kind of crazy. I'm not saying that he's not worth it, but it's just it makes it so hard to build your lineup if you put him in there. I'm sure I'll have some of him sprinkled in, but I do think that I will be kind of low owned on him. And in a way, I do hope that he is high owned because, I'm sure that he's going to score 100, 125, 130, somewhere around there. But I think that the likelihood that the underdogs you have to put in your lineup, if you put him in that lineup, that I feel more comfortable paying, in the 92 to 9,500 range and having a little bit extra money than playing him and having all those lower priced guys. If you're playing multiple lineups, you have to have him in a couple. But I honestly would be surprised if the optimal lineup has him in it.
The one thing, though, I'm going to say, most of everything we do in the war room for the most part is based off DraftKings. That's what the majority of people play. If people have questions for FanDuel, we will answer FanDuel questions. But our war room and everything is based off DraftKings. But on FanDuel, Chimaev is the second highest priced fighter on there. You have to lock him in. Put him in a spot, whether you want to put him in captain, whether you want to put him in your lineup, you have to. There's no reason to go at Robert Whittaker, who's, I think, $1 more than him, who is not going to score as highly as him. It's very unlikely, I think. And he's basically the lock of the slate. So unless you really want to go super, super, super contrarian on FanDuel, lock him in.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, FanDuel, you have to have him in your lineup. If you might give him multiple, then I certainly would suggest a couple that don't have him. But the price difference between FanDuel and DraftKings is night and day. DraftKings, you can make the argument not to have him in your lineup just because he's so high priced.
All right, next fight we got Alex Oliveira versus Peter Sobotta. What do you think, Ryan, on this one?
I know we differ on this one. I think that Sobotta, I think that he will be able to finish Oliveira. I think that Oliveira is just at the point in his career where he's kind of, he faces the up-and-comers and, gives him a good fight. But at the end of the day, he's just not what he used to be. He has lost 3 of his last 5 fights. And in the 2 that he did win, he honestly didn't look that great. I think that Sobotta very well could finish him via sub. Oliveira has had issues in the past with getting submitted, and that is what Sobotta is, known for. He's won 17 of his fights via submission. Neither of them strike very much. Sobotta does go for 1.76 takedowns per fight, and Oliveira does not have the best takedown defense. So I think that at 7,500, he may be one of my favorite underdogs of this slate. I think that the likelihood that he gets a finish is pretty high, and even if he doesn't get the finish, I think he'll be able to get enough strikes and get enough takedowns in this fight that he'll pay off his $7,500 price tag.
This fight really comes down to what is Alex Oliveira going to do? Is he going to actually fight smart and do what he should? Or is he going to fight like an idiot like he does in half of his fights? When he's supposed to take someone down, he stands and strikes. When he's supposed to stand and strike, he takes people down. He just never does what you think he's going to do or should do. He's a hard fighter to trust. I mean, if he fought smart, you'd keep it fight standing, and he'd probably knock out Sobotta. Sobotta's been, knocked out multiple times. He's been rocked a lot in the fights. So I do see how Alex Oliveira could win this fight and probably should win the fight. But the problem is he just doesn't fight smart. But Sobotta's got good wrestling. He's got good BJJ. Like you said, he almost averages 2 takedowns per round or per fight. If he does get Oliveira down, he like you said, he's probably going to get a submission. Like, I think this is a fight you're going to want to have in your lineup one way or another, whether you feel like you need Oliveira or Sobotta. I honestly think it's a great fight to somewhat target for GPP, because if Sobotta wins, it's either be by decision or he's going to get a submission, which either way, at his price and everything, he's going to pay off. But if Alex Oliveira wins, it's probably going to be by KO. And if he gets a KO, he's going to pay off his value and probably be on an optimal lineup. Like you said, I still agree with you, Ryan. I do think, Sobotta is the play or the better play. I think, especially for DraftKings at his price tag. But it's not going to shock me by any means if Oliveira comes out here and just knocks him out in the first round or second round. It wouldn't surprise me at all. All right. Moving on to the next fight. We got Paul Craig versus Antigulov. I'm not even going to bother pronouncing his first name.
Come on, I did it on my podcast.
Not even going to take a chance. I'll butcher it anyways. But this fight is the mid-range fight. You got Antigulov, who's 8,200, Paul Craig, who's 8,000. This is another fight like the last fight. You're probably going to want to target GPP, probably this one more than the other one, because Antigulov is going to come out full bore first round, look for takedowns, and once he gets you down, he's trying to get the finish and smother you. But he's got literally about 3-4 minutes worth of cardio, and then he's done. After that, basically he's going to lose the fight. That's what's happened in his prior fights, and I just don't see how that changes. And where Paul Craig doesn't have the greatest chin, he's been knocked out a few times, but he always, he's the opposite, where he might lose the first round probably in most of his fights, but then he comes back strong in rounds 2 and 3, and that's when he usually ends up getting a victory. He's gotten 2, wins via submission in the third round. Craig, in all of his 17 fights that he has, he's only gone to decision once, and that was a draw. Every other fight, he's either won it, or he's got knocked out, and he got submitted once. But either way, this is an all-in fight for GPP. I feel like I'm more on the Paul Craig side. I think he's going to weather that storm early. He's got a big size and reach advantage. I think he's got like a 5-inch height advantage and a 6-inch reach advantage, or vice versa. And I think, he might get taken down, but even if he does get taken down, Craig's got very good, submission defense on his back. He's always looking for subs. And I think that could, mess with Antigulov. But on the same side, Antigulov, he's not a bad play. If he does win, it's going to be inside the first round. He's going to be on the optimal lineup at 8,200. You're going to want these guys one way or another in your lineup, but I prefer Paul Craig, and I think he's going to get it, a second or a third round submission, or possibly TKO, but more likely submission win.
Yeah, I lean Antigulov a little bit more. I think that both fighters, like you said, Antigulov has shown that he doesn't have the best gas tank. But both fighters are very good at the same exact thing. Both fighters are good at getting the takedown. Both fighters are good at the submission. So I think that can negate each other sometimes, because they're both good at the same thing. I don't think that I will have, honestly, much of this fight on either side, honestly. Because unlike you, I don't think that it ends in the first round. Maybe late second, early third. But I don't think that it ends early on like you think. I know that is what the Vegas lines say. They have the over-under at 1.5. But I think that the under is the play there. The over is the play there. And same with DraftKings. I think that it goes later into the fight. So, I mean, both I think are good multi-lineup GPP plays where, either of them, sure, they could break the slate with their price tag, but I don't love either of them, honestly.
But I gotta, if we're looking through all the fights we have on this card, how many do you think end in a finish? I mean, Wood could, Emeev, no, Becci, no, Boser, maybe, Evloev, Grundy, probably not, Aspinall, yes, Dalby, probably not, Trinaldo, Herbert, probably not, Chimaev, yes, Oliveira. So that's why
I see 1, 2, 3. I see 4 that definitely I think will end in finishes, and probably another 2 or 3 that I think could end in finishes.
So, that's why when you say that, you're not going to have them in your line, it just seems that they're, especially at their price point, because a lot of the guys even you probably suspect are going to get finishes are probably, Chimaev, Wood, they're priced way higher. When you have these two guys in the middle who are going to get that, that range, and even if they finish in the second or third, they're still going to get, 80, 90 points, which is a lot more than most of these guys are going to get, in a decision. So I feel like you just have to have them. I mean, obviously both, we'll find out tomorrow night. But to me, it just seems like if you're playing GPP, you got to have one or the other, whatever which way you feel it's going to go, or whatever which way it fits your builds. I just think this is one of the fights I feel like you just have to have. I don't think Vegas would have this fight. I think it's like a -400 to finish inside the distance as a fight as a whole, or something ridiculous like that.
Let's see.
I think it's like -300, -400 for them to finish inside the distance.
Paul Craig inside the distance is 135.
No, I'm talking about the fight as a whole. It's -425 as a whole, not to not go to decision. So to me, just like with that kind of odds, it's going to finish at some point. I just think there's no way at their price that they're not going to pay off, and probably going to be on the optimal one way or another if they get the finish. I don't know. But all right, let's go to the next fight. We got Carla Esparza versus Marina Rodriguez. Ryan, what do you think on this one?
I like Rodriguez. I think that she throws a good amount of strikes. She throws and lands more than 5 strikes per minute. The issue with her in the past is that if she does get taken down, which Esparza has been known to, take fighters down, that she is lost on her back, and that has caused her to get draws in 2 out of her last 4 fights. Just because she gets taken down and she can't do anything when she's on her back. So if she can keep the fight standing, I do think that she will throw enough strikes to pick Esparza apart and get a good score for cash at the $8,600 price point. I do think, and I know you said you don't agree with this, but I think she could work in 1 or 2 takedowns, honestly, as well. She never really has, so it's a shot in the dark. But Esparza only has a 48% takedown defense, so Not that she would want to stay on the ground long at all, but if she can work that in, that's still 5 points on DraftKings. So if she can work that in, I don't think it'd be the worst idea for her, where she has struggled winning rounds in the past.
This fight is, both of them to me are cash plays. I don't see either of them getting finishes. So you can basically take that right out. If anything, I would say if you want, if you're playing like 20 plus lineups for GPP, I would say honestly, if that has the higher upside, would probably be Esparza, just because of the takedowns. She has a good wrestling background. She averages 3 takedowns per 15 minutes. So if she is able to execute her game plan and get Rodriguez down and keep do it for all 3 rounds, she could be a GPP play. But no way would I. She's not a finisher. She doesn't strike at high volume, but I could see a path to where it possibly could happen. But I still wouldn't trust it. I think her highest DraftKings points total was like 87 points.
Yeah,
and most of the time it's in the low 70s to 60s. So I just, for the most part, you could play Esparza for cash. She's going to, strike just enough. I mean, it doesn't throw too high, but 2.3. But in this fight, if Rodriguez is able to keep it standing, she'll strike enough, and she'll have to strike more than her normal volume to keep up. So she might, be a decent cash punt play. She's not probably going to get finished. And Rodriguez, on the other hand, throws 5.5 significant strikes a minute. That's going to end up being, 75 significant strikes potentially, if not more, per round, or not per the fight. Probably gets closer to 100. So she's going to probably, in a decision with victory, get 80 points. She's what, 8.6K?
Yeah, 8.6.
8.6. That's borderline going to, be a fine cash play. She could get up to 86, maybe 90 if she, pushes the, pace a little bit and can stop the takedowns. But the big problem is, like you said, like the first round, she's a slow starter. She always seems to lose that first round and gets a 10-8. Then she goes out and starches the person for the next 2 rounds, and that's why she has 2 draws. She's 2-0-2 in the UFC. I don't think that's ever happened before, where someone has 2 draws that many times in a short period, in only 4 fights.
Yeah, it never happens.
So
how often do you see a draw?
Yeah, I mean, it might happen once in your career, and that would even be a lot for most people. So to happen twice just shows you that's such a slow starter and not great, takedown defense. She defends at 33%. So if she can avoid the takedowns and use her height and reach on Esparza, it's a pretty big height and reach advantage for Rodriguez. She should pick her apart for all 3 rounds. But I honestly think, if you had a gun to my head, this could be another draw. I think Esparza, honestly, could come out, grapple her for the first round, and then Rodriguez finally picks it up round 2 and round 3, and it becomes, a 29 or 28-28 or 29-29, whatever it is. And I can honestly see it coming again, just because Esparza does have pretty good wrestling, and Rodriguez's defense is so bad, But I still lean Rodriguez. I'm hopefully, she's still improving on each fight, but I still lean Rodriguez to get a decision victory, and she's a fine cash play.
Yeah.
All right, next fight. Fabricio Werdum versus Alexander Gustafsson. Man, we talked about this on your pod the other night. I just don't know where either of these guys are mentally. That's the thing. That's one thing you cannot judge. You can judge a guy by his shape, his skills, this and that, but mentally you have no idea. And that's what makes it tough for me on this fight. Like, if Gustafsson didn't do his quick, retirement and then decide not to come out and was just, still part of, lost his last fight against Smith, took some time off and came back, I would be more comfortable with him being this big of a favorite. On the feet, he has a huge advantage. He's a way better striker. He's going to be slightly, height and reach advantage, way better technical striker, going to be quicker. But taking a layoff like that, is he coming back to fight, and especially moving up to heavyweight? Is he doing it because he needs money during this pandemic? Is he doing it? I just don't, why, like, what was his reason for retiring and now coming back? I haven't really heard, too much besides saying, someone, hearing one report saying it was just, he was really upset that night he lost and just said, I was done, and that's why he retired, but he didn't really mean it. But if he's back to being Gus, I think he has a good chance of probably knocking out Werdum at some point. I looked at Gus on the scale, though. He is very, very thick. Before, when he was fighting at light heavyweight, he was, very slender. I felt like he wasn't he's a tall dude, like more lanky than being like very stocky build. But if you looked at him at weigh-ins, he was very, very thick in the midsection. Like not fat, but just thick. And I just don't know if, luckily he's going against Werdum, who doesn't have great cardio, because that could be worrisome a little bit, just knowing that Gustafsson maybe might be a little bit out of shape. Maybe this extra weight's going to carry too much and he won't be able to last all 3 rounds. But luckily it's not a 5-round fight, what Gus is used to fighting in. But Werdum, on the other hand, I haven't really talked about him much. For him to win, he needs to get the fight on the mat. He doesn't have great, straight wrestling takedowns. He does, a lot of trips, a lot of weird, unorthodox ways to get his fights down on the mat. And if he does get it down, Anthony Smith just submitted Gustafsson in his last fight, and who's nowhere near has the BJJ credentials of Werdum. If Werdum gets him down, it's going to be over relatively quickly. For DraftKings, Gustafsson is, the preferred play. I think he's semi-safer if he comes in with the right mindset. He's probably, for us, probably a single entry. You could probably use him for single entry. He does definitely get it. If he wins by, he's going to score well. But if Werdum, on the other hand, he's a multi-entry guy. If you're playing, 10 lineups or more, maybe even like that 5 to 10 range, you could probably throw him in one. But you definitely want to sprinkle him a little bit, because he has a high upside if he does get that submission win. I don't know. What else do you want to talk about on this one, Ryan?
Yeah, I'm kind of the same way. At these next 2 fights, this one and the next one, like I said on my podcast, these are guys that honestly should have retired, or in Gustafsson's case, stay retired. Werdum looked absolutely horrible in his last fight against Alexei Olenek, and he got pieced apart against Olenek, who is not known for his striking at all. So if a guy like that is able to pick apart Werdum, if Gustafsson can carry his weight good, I don't think that Werdum is going to be able to handle Alexander's striking. So I do lean Alexander, but at his price point, I'd feel more comfortable if he was around the 87 to 9,000 range. At his price point at 9,300. Man, it's tough, just because he has looked really bad as well in his last couple fights. Ever since that Jones fight, he just has not looked good. And that's going to kill your lineup if you're paying 9,300 and he puts out a 30-point dud. So, multiple GPP lineups, absolutely. Anything outside of that, I wouldn't touch this fight.
Yeah, like like both of them on the scale. When I watched them on the scale today, both of them look different than what I thought. Like Werdum looked very flabby in his last fight, out of shape, But when I saw him on the scales today, he actually looked very fit. So maybe he's coming in with a better game plan. Maybe he's more ready, because I know the last fight was right during like the beginning of the pandemic. So maybe he didn't get the proper training, and he was training up at Big Bear, I think, in California or somewhere out that way, and he was doing, I think, via Skype, like a lot of his training.
Yeah.
So so obviously, hopefully now he's got the proper training, and that's why he looked a lot better on the scales. So it wouldn't, that's what I'm saying. Like, it's not going to surprise me if Werdum comes out here and submits him. But I don't know. Gustafsson is one of my favorite fighters, so I'm a little bit biased towards him, to a default. But I think Gustafsson is either probably going to win a 3-round decision victory, very easily, 3 rounds, or it's going to be him by a TKO at probably second or third round. All right. Now we're moving on to the retirement match, literally. Both of these guys should have retired a while ago, and they're retiring both probably after this fight. We got Mauricio Shogun Rua versus Antonio Nogueira. Honestly, this is another fight for GPPs. You're probably going to want to, target to a degree. I mean, this is the third time they're fighting. Shogun's won both. I believe he's knocked him out both times. I know at least the last time he definitely knocked him out. But Nogueira, surprisingly, even in his last couple of fights, has shown some power in his hands. He's not fast. He's definitely lost some speed. If you have to go by technical striking, Nogueira is probably the better technical striker over Rua. I'm just going to call him Shogun. But the problem is he's very low volume. He doesn't, his chin's starting to go. Mauricio is more high volume. He's less likely to get knocked out. He has been knocked out, but I just think the volume's going to be too much. Nogueira's been clipped too many times. He's 44 years old versus Mauricio's 38. I think Shogun gets a knockout, probably second round. I'm guessing. I don't think this is probably one you're probably going to want to target for odds betting, probably under a round and a half. I don't think it's going to go too much longer than that. If it makes it to the third round, it's going to be a sloppy fight, I think. But I think for DraftKings, Mauricio's my preferred play, but I would still have some nog. I think he has the potential to still land that punch. His power still translates. He's getting slower, but the power's still there. But I think, Shogun's the play at this point. What do you think, Ryan?
Yeah, I'm the same exact way. Like you said, Shogun beat him 5 years ago, and that's when Nogueira was actually a semi-good fighter. So if he can beat him 5 years ago, it isn't going to be any different now, in my opinion. The only thing that Nogueira has backing him at all is, like you said on my podcast, that he's been on record saying that he's retiring after this fight. A guy like Nogueira who has the legacy that his family has in the UFC, in the MMA business, that he's going to want to try to go out on top. And that he's going to want to try to go out, putting on a good show. I just don't think that he's going to be able to do it in this one. So yeah, I do like Shogun. I'll probably sprinkle in a couple Nogueira into my lineup just because of the what if factor and because of his price. But I think that Shogun more than likely finishes him again, late second, early third, and we see at least Nogueira retire, and more than likely Shogun too.
That's what I'm. As much as I know, Shogun should win this fight and probably will win this fight, I kind of hope Nogueira gets the knockout victory, so that way it forces Shogun to retire as well. I want them to both retire. I want them to both hug it out at the end and just drop their gloves in the middle of the octagon and just walk out, call it a day. Shogun should not be fighting anymore. He's almost 40. He's been in almost 40 professional fights. He needs to retire. Yeah, and obviously Nogueira knows he's got to retire, so he's doing it. So at least that's the only reason why I really want Nogueira to win. I have no dog in this fight per se, and neither of them are my favorite fighters. So, all right, let's move on to the next fight. We got the main event here: Robert Whittaker versus Darren Till. Let's start with you, Ryan. What do you think of this fight as a whole?
Yeah, so early on I went back and forth on this fight. More I looked into it, though, the more that Whittaker just stood out to me. Till in his career, just the fighters that he has fought, while they haven't been scrubs, they're not on the level that Whittaker is, and the it seems like the better fighters that Till has been fighting against, he has been struggling against. Now, yes, he did look very good against Kelvin Gastelum. And that was his first fight in this division, I do believe. But I just don't think that he's going to be able to withstand Whittaker's striking skills. Till really does not have the best fight IQ. He kind of does the same thing, the same strikes over and over again, which for a fighter like Whittaker who has been through it all, he's been in this a while. I think that he should be able to win. For Whittaker's price, I like him a lot because I think that you're either going to get a good amount of significant strikes with a decision victory, or you'll get a finish, late third or early fourth, because this is a 5-round fight being the main event. I do like him a lot at his price point.
Yeah, you pretty much summed it up pretty well. Like, I think Whittaker, out of the two guys, you want to play him. He's probably going to be a guy you're going to want in a majority of your lineups. He throws nearly 5 significant strikes per minute, and where Till is absorbing over 3, which is a lot. The one thing that I think Whittaker's probably going to do, which he hasn't really had a chance to do, because most of the fighters that he's fought in his last 5, 6, 7 fights have all been very, very good wrestlers. And Whittaker's not a bad wrestler by any means, but he tried out here. He was on the Commonwealth team in Australia, or tried out for him. I think Whittaker's going to mix in some takedowns. If he can get Till down, he'd probably get a ground and pound him, or maybe even get a submission. It wouldn't surprise me, but I just think if that's the path that Whittaker might want to take, just knowing Till does have that one punch power. If Till does land a punch, he could knock out Whittaker. Whittaker's been dropped, multiple times against Yoel. He did get knocked out in his last fight against Izzy. He was dropped twice and then knocked out. But even if it stays standing, I just think Whittaker's volume will be too much, and he's very smart when he fights. I mean, to take on Yoel Romero and survive with all the crazy shit that Romero does, I think that shows you how he can adapt well during a fight and still win and overcome obstacles, where Till, once something bad happens to him in a fight, he's done. Like, if you watch him during the Woodley fight, he didn't even throw a punch. He got absolutely murdered because he didn't know what to do with Woodley. He was thinking as soon as you have Till thinking, he can't do anything. I mean, for DraftKings, I think you want to have a lot of Whittaker in your lineups. Obviously Till does have his upside. He could get the knockdown or knockout, but I wouldn't honestly have too much of him. He's definitely worth, if you're playing 10 lineups, having maybe 2, maybe 3 lineups with Till in them, and the rest should have, the other 7 or 6 should have Whittaker in them. But it's gonna be a very entertaining card. This is the first time we've ever had, since UFC 2, we've had 15 fights on a card, which for DraftKings as a whole makes it very, very interesting. I mean, lately we've had anywhere from 10 to 12 fights on a card during this whole pandemic, and even in general, every once in a while we get a 13-card fight, which is awesome, or maybe even a 14-card fight. A 15-fight card makes this very, very interesting, and I think there's a lot more, viable options, and also ownership's going to be spread out. So you don't really have to look for that guy who's 10%, 5% owned who just busts out and breaks out, because I think the ownership, besides a few guys like Chimaev, maybe Wood and Aspinall, it's going to be very spread out. So don't focus primarily too much on trying to think of the ownership on this slate. I think it's going to be fairly spread, and just pick guys who you think are going to win. What do you think, Ryan? What do you think as kind of a slate as a whole? What do you think?
Yeah, I think it'll be a very interesting one. Like you said, it's not how it has been lately, where you have a lot of ties or stuff like that. I'd be very surprised if we see a tie on this card for the top prize. So yeah, I do think it will be a very interesting card because the builds are going to be a lot different, I think. Do you go Chimaev and pay that huge $9,800 price point and then throw in some dogs? Do you go mid tier? Do you go a couple dogs and then some of the lower higher priced guys? So there's just so many different ways that you can build a lineup this card, being so many different fights. So yeah, it definitely will be an interesting card. It'll be entertaining. And hopefully our viewers and our subscribers can win some money. Hopefully we can win some money, and it's a good day for all.
And it's just like that top tiers is going to be what kind of makes or breaks the slate. Like, Emeev is probably going to be very low owned at 9,400. But if he goes out there and does get a submission or TKO win, he's probably going to be very low owned and break the slate. But I don't know if he's going to do it. And same thing, like even you have Dalby at 9.2, you have Evloev, all these, you have like Boser, like those kind of guys. I don't know, like it's so weird. Usually, in the 9K range, you have like solid chances of getting a finish or scoring highly. Occasionally there's one person out of like the group of five that's not going to do well, but there's so many in that range that don't have great upside, or they're hard to trust. It's going to be very, very interesting this week, with the builds and everything. I just think ownership is going to be very, very spread out, hard to predict.
Yeah, absolutely.
But all right, that's got to, thanks for our subs. We need a name for this podcast. I just kind of came up, right now it's called the DFI MMA Access Podcast. We need an actual name for this podcast. So when you guys are in the war room, I want to see you guys comment in below. What do you think we should name this podcast going forward? All suggestions are welcome. Obviously, keep it PG-13. But we want some user feedback, or drop us a comment on something else you might want to see while we're talking about this podcast. You want us to talk about just certain fighters or by tiers. We want to get your feedback as much as we're just want to help you guys win as much and get a better understanding. Because I know most of our subs are huge MMA fans, and the ones that are know enough or know a decent amount. So we want your feedback, especially guys who are newer to the the war rooms, on what you want from this podcast, or any suggestions you want it to be. Just literally one hit, 15-minute podcast with our picks and why. We went a little longer with this one because there's 15 fights on it. I talked to Ryan before the pod. We wanted to try to do it like a half an hour, 40 minutes, but with 15 fights, it's nearly impossible.
Yeah.
Unless we just want to literally say this is a GPP play, that doesn't help.
Right. The reason that we did this and we want to keep doing it moving forward is, yes, we can always answer your questions in the war room. Me or Dave will be there to answer those questions. But this also gives you a little bit of input. That way, in case we miss your question, or, there's something that you're just not sure about, this gives you another path to be able to dive into the information, another way to hear the information, because sometimes it's better to hear it than see it. You can put it, lineups together better, hearing exactly why we think these things compared to, just seeing names on a page. So
yeah, that's the main reason, because we could break down every single fight in the war room, but it takes a lot of our time. It would take up so much space in the war room to literally break down every single fight. That's the whole point of the war room is to have the header up top, give you the plays, and then have some write-ups on certain key areas, and that's how you're supposed to kind of build it. But this at least gives you a breakdown now of every single fight, in a visual, in the audio version of it. And that way you can kind of hear what we say. Maybe something just clicks. Maybe you're like, oh, I like Dave's part about Oliveira possibly getting a knockout. I'm going to put him a little bit more in my lineup. Or I like Ryan's explanation. I'm going to put more of him in. Even though one of us might side one way or another, you can visually hear it, and you can pick up certain things that just might trigger you. Like, I want to do it just because of this reason. And hopefully that's what comes about this podcast. Obviously, all feedback is welcome, but I think that's it from us. Follow Ryan at what is it, RC or RSCMMA89 on Twitter, at dr_bean17 on Twitter. We're always available. Our DMs are wide open. So if you have questions, anything, obviously ask away. And we'll see you tomorrow, or we'll see you tonight. So probably not post this till the morning. And good luck to everybody. Hopefully, all see green things, on Saturday night.
Absolutely.